Les platico un poquito la biografía de Mano. Él ha estado en el equipo de desarrollo de relaciones para Google durante los últimos 4 años y es la cabeza de desarrollo para Google GEO APIs. Ha viajado por todo el mundo, ayudando a diferentes individuos, corporaciones, gobiernos y organizaciones a usar las tecnologías de mapas de Google para transmitir su mensaje a todo el planeta. Antes de Google, Mano tenía una carrera ecléctica que involucraba una maestría en historia, una en manejo de la información de sistemas y un trabajo como gerente de datos en organizaciones no gubernamentales por más de una década. Entonces, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí, los dejo con Mano.
Gracias, and hola, and unfortunately we've now used all of my Spanish. So I apologize for not speaking Spanish and only doing this in English, but there we are. So my name is Mano Marks. I am a developer advocate, much like Tim Bray and Pete LePage. It is my job to do this, to come out to talk to you and to tell you about Google Geo APIs and get you excited about them, but also to advocate on behalf of developers back with the Google Geo engineering teams. I'm going to be talking today about the Places API. So if you saw the keynote, you saw a part of this image in the initial presentation. In 2005, we launched the Google Maps API, and we launched Google Maps. And it was very exciting, and a lot of people used it to put data on the web. It's basic points on a map. But in those 6 years, we've moved beyond points on a map, beyond latitude and longitude. And what I'm going to be talking to you about now is places. So places is one of those words that in English that give translators problems. Because if you look it up on the web, there's probably 100 different definitions of the word place. So the best thing I can do is give you an example. And the example is, what if somebody asks you where you are right now? If you're looking at your GPS device, which is in the lower left corner and blocked by my little end screen there, it's going to tell you a latitude and longitude. That's not actually our latitude and longitude, but that's the latitude and longitude of San Francisco. That's not the way most people talk, though. So if somebody asked me online, where are you right now? I would probably say I'm in Mexico City. I am at esta, Google. I am at this event. I am in this room. I may be in room, whatever, room 8, whatever, if there were a number. Or you might say something more generally, I am at a bar. So the idea behind the Places API and behind Google Places is to try and capture this idea that all these different things are places, that there's a sense of a location that encompasses Mexico City, a bar, esta, Google, I am in North America. It encompasses all those things and more. So you'll see we launched on Google Maps the Google Places place pages. And we get the data for millions of different places from a lot of different sources. We have the geographic data that tells us where cities, streets, all those things are. But we also have things like businesses, restaurants, government buildings, landmarks, all these sort of things. We get them from a lot of different data sources, one of which is scraping KML and GRSS files from the web, finding those things, clustering them together. When lots of people say, there's something here, we know that there's something there. And then we synthesize this information and give it to you on place pages. And so this is findable on Google Maps, but is also findable on your mobile application. So there's a Places application on an Android device, if you downloaded it. So you can do things like search for things that are nearby a particular location. But that mobile app uses an infrastructure, a fundamental infrastructure that at Google I/O this year we exposed to everybody, and that is the Google Places API. And we wanted to find a simple, easy way for all of you to incorporate places into your applications. Moving beyond simply latitude and longitude and addresses, polygons and that sort of thing, but showing you that you can actually integrate our millions of places into your application without having to download millions of places. Okay, so what are some of these features? First of all, I'm going to ask you a question, because I like to ask people questions. How many of you have used the Google Maps API, have put a Google Map on your website? Ah, good. Thank you. How many of you have done that recently? Good. Okay. So you know that we're on version 3 of the Google Maps API, that we developed the Google Maps API for the most recent one, for mobile devices, for finding things. And this is very important for the Places API because when you're on a mobile device, you're wanting to find things that are nearby. So what we do is we give you this ability. We give you the ability to find stores, churches, bars, landmarks, all these sort of things. Find those things nearby. We also give you an autocomplete. So autocomplete means that when you start typing something, we can automatically start making guesses as to what you're typing. This is also really important on mobile devices because the fewer on a phone, the fewer times you have to type something into keyboard, the better. And we felt it was really important to integrate most of these major features with the Maps API. So I'm going to start with a very simple example. This is search. And if I click on this map, it's going to search for political things nearby our location. And this is, these are going to mean more to you than to me, I'm sure. But as you see here, I'm just clicking on things that are in our political places database. So if I click on these things, it automatically does a search and loads in new data. And you can see what it does is it passes to my application JavaScript. I'm passing rather to the Places API some JavaScript in a JSON form and saying, find me these things. And you can see that it's doing some interesting things here. First of all, we have the location, which is the center point of the where I'm clicking. So find things, and this is actually giving a radius, so find things within 1,000 meters of this location. And specify the type. So in this case, we're saying specify political units. And it also giving a bounding box to places to tell it, hey, also only find things that are actually on the map that I'm showing you right now. And this is just a more detailed look at what it looks like. So I can pass in a request. This is a simplified version, so it all fits on one slide. I load this, the Places service, and then I do a service search, and I pass it in the request and a callback. And the callback says do things. In this case, put the points on the map. And this is really all you need to do. So service, adding an event listener for when I click on the map, it clicks that event gives me the latitude and longitude, and I pass that into the application. And then I didn't bother to say, this is just, add an additional marker. And then adding autocompletes, so you can see here I decided to do an autocomplete sample. So say I wanted to type in, well, let's say restaurant. Well, it's going to give me restaurants. And you'll notice that the restaurants are all in Mexico City. They're all around where I'm actually showing you places. So it's giving me contextually relevant places automatically. And this is done without you having to say, very much at all. So if I were to actually switch to San Francisco and give me restaurants, it's not going to show me restaurants in San Francisco. It's going to show me restaurants in San Francisco. Contextually relevant autocomplete without you having to actually find these places. And all I'm having to do is type in a few letters, and on a phone, that's going to be really important that you're not typing in tons of characters. Okay. And this is what the code looks like. It's pretty simple. I'm just saying, give me a new autocomplete on this element. And then adding this event listener to the map that says when this place is changed, show me the selected place and all the selected places, and then it populates it onto the map. Very simple to add. I want to point out something else that we've done. So when we launched the Google Maps API version 3, as I mentioned, one of the key things that we wanted to do was to make sure that it worked on mobile, which meant downloading very little code to your applications. In version 2 of the Maps API, if you ever used that, if you created a map, the map knew about everything. The map knew about Street View, it knew about markers, it knew about every piece of your application. It was the centerpiece. But that meant that every time you downloaded a map onto a mobile device, it was downloading 100 megabytes of code. We chopped, sorry, not megabytes, kilobytes. It was downloading tons and tons of code. So what we did when we created version 3 was that we chopped it down so that you only loaded those parts of the application that you needed, those parts of Google Maps that you needed. And then when we started adding things to it, we added these special libraries so that if you don't add this library, and in this case it's google.maps.places, if you don't add that separate library, your Maps API knows nothing about it. So compartmentalizing our code. So we compartmentalize the code so you only load places if you actually need it in your application. And we found that you end up loading a basic map about 7 times faster than you would in version 2, and it's only gotten better over time. But what are all the features of the Places API? So I've already mentioned search, and search comes in 2 flavors. There's a basic search and a detailed search, which gives you access to a lot more information about the place. There's also the autocomplete, which we just talked about. And then there's check-in management. So how many of you use a check-in application? Like Foursquare, Gowalla, Latitude, Google+? Okay. Sounds like about half of you. Is there there's probably some local Mexico check-in applications? No? Nobody's, I'm getting shaking hands. Okay. Check-in applications were very interesting. The idea is that you go to a place, on your phone, you say, this is where I am. And it ended up doing some really interesting things. One is, it gave the check-in applications a ton of data about where things were. Because if you went to a conference, or you went to a bar and you said, I am here, and then and that wasn't in Foursquare or Gowalla or any of those applications, if they didn't know about that place, you typed it in and you sent it to them. This was tremendously beneficial to these applications and is really kind of why they developed it, so they could develop a big store of data about where things are. So we now give you that capability within the Places API. Now this part is not actually part of it's not integrated with them directly with the JavaScript Maps API. It's a direct REST call to our services. So we give you the ability to do check-in management, that is, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more. And you can actually add and delete places to your own personal account, developer account. I just realized I'm not in full screen mode. I prefer that. That looks better, doesn't it? Okay, so let's go on. So as I mentioned, there's these two methods of access. You can integrate directly with the Maps API, or you can get a direct web service. So let's talk about check-in. Now the idea behind a check-in application, in this case, a check-in application that you're developing, is that you're wanting to allow your users to tell the world where they are, or tell a select number of people, select their friends. I'm not actually going to even guess. There's probably a lot of other uses for check-in applications. And also in the process, they're giving you data about where things are. So what we allow you to do is to allow you to basically do an anonymous check-in to Google to say, somebody is at this place. You're not giving any user information to us. So there's no privacy concerns on our part. You're not sharing any user information. All you're doing is basically pinging Google and saying, somebody checked in to this location. I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute, but what that does is it improves search, but only for your application. Now, why is that? Now, say I have a check-in application that is focused around people meeting at bars, at a bar in a local area. But I want to show them additional things that are around it, partially for navigation purposes, but also to allow them to check in other places. Now I don't know you, I'm just picking on you in general. Yes, you. You have a check-in application, and it's focused on churches. And you want to show churches. And partially you're wanting to collect a big database of churches, but also you're wanting to just give a better churchly experience to your users. Now there might not be a lot of overlap between our users. So you don't want your church's application, you don't want the search for that impacted by the number of check-ins that I have in bars around you. So we customize that search just for you. You have a developer key that you use, and anytime that key is used to do a search, whether it's an autocomplete or a direct search for particular locations, the search quality, the search ranking for things where people have checked in with your application, those places increase in rank, and we keep track of that. So it's a great way for you to not have to worry about if something's really popular, but it's not really popular with Google, it's really popular just with your application, it will show up higher in your search ranks. And as I mentioned before, it's anonymous as far as Google is concerned. And this is what it looks like. This is your the basic format. You do a post, and you can do this in any application. In Python you'd use liburl or something like that. There's a lot of different libraries for doing these post applications. And you just do a post to this URL. You tell us whether you're using a sensor, and you give us a key. And the key is your developer key, and you register for that using the Google Developer Console. And you tell it what the host is, and you give a reference, which is a place reference, which you'll get when you do your search. So you do the search for the place, they find it, they click on it, and they get a place reference. You reference that place. So totally anonymous, there's nothing in there that tells you anything about the user. And this is what something actually looks like. Now typically, if you're using a mobile application, your sensor is equal to true. So it's important that you always use that. It's something that we have to use for our data providers. If you have a question about it, I can tell you later. Then you give a key, and so here's this developer key, and it's long. It actually goes up. I didn't bother to to wrap it, but it's actually a long one. And then you pass it in a reference, and you'll see there's a very long reference here. So that's it. So you pass that in, you're done. You don't, you'll get a response. You want to check to make sure that the response went through, but you don't need to do anything with the response. So the next thing you can do is you can add and delete places, because Google doesn't know about every place in the world. Nobody does, obviously. It's a tremendous data collection effort that's going on to try and find these places, to find places in the world. But also places go away. So if I would go to a bar, that bar might not be there in a year. In the United States, something like 20% of businesses close or open within a year. So that means there's a tremendous turnover in what a place actually is. So you can add a place, and you can add that place so that it is available only, it is available initially only to your application, but it's available to you immediately. So you're essentially creating a temporarily private data store of places within Google Places. There's also nothing that prevents you from collecting a separate database of all these places yourself. And then what happens is it goes through a moderation process. So we have a team at Google where we review new places as they come online, and we do it in a semi-automated way. And so it might end up actually as part of the general Google Places data store, but it'll always be part of your data store. And it's a very simple, again, very simple way to do this. So you do a post, same big URL, key, sensor, etc. You post in a location, and then any one of all the parameters that we have that will allow us to get more information about that place. So in this case, this is in a location in Sydney, and it's a fake Google shoe store in Sydney. We often use Sydney, Australia examples because the Google Maps API engineering team is located there. So so that's the basics. So you can add, delete, you can do check-ins, you can integrate directly with the Google Maps API, and that's it. And I actually thought there would be more questions, so I'm not going to have a ton more to say. So here we have a bunch of Google GEO API sessions that happened at Google I/O. I'm going to encourage you to take a look at these if you want to know more about places. There's some in the Google GEO API, Secret and Surprises. There's also the Connecting People and Places talk that will give you some more information. I'm also in a couple of these different sessions. So now, next, I just listed a bunch of people if you want things to follow. So on Twitter, there's the Google Maps API feed. There's also the Google Geo Developers blog, where we post announcements and interesting applications that people have done using our APIs. And if you want to follow me personally, I also blog about a lot of these things. So my Twitter feed, I'm also on Google+, and I have a blog. So I am now going to open this up for questions. And you can ask me about Google Places or really anything to do with our Google Geo platform. So do we have like a microphone or something for people, or should I just call on people? Okay, no, okay, it's definitely a small enough group. So if you speak, and then I'll repeat your question. Okay, I apologize. I can't hear you because there's the sound of the fans. So. Why doesn't Google have an application to add places? Okay, so that's interesting. So the question is, why do we not have an application as opposed to just making this developer experience? We sort of do. We collect data from local businesses. So there's a way that a local business can actually tell us where they are. But we don't currently, in our Places application, allow you to add in an additional place if you found it. And I think we should, and I can't make any promises or guarantees, but I think that's probably something that we will add along the way. There's some licensing problems with data, and there's also a moderation problem that we'd have to just build the infrastructure to do it. But it should, yes, second question. Okay. So the question is about Google Map Maker. And how many of you are familiar with Google Map Maker? Not very many. Okay. So Google Map Maker is our application that allows you to give us more data. By the way, you can use Map Maker to add things that will eventually end up in Places. Thank you for the reminder. Yes. So the question is, why is the data in Map Maker better than the data on maps.google.com, and when are we going to shift over the data? The process with Google Map Maker, and if you have a Gmail account, you can go to Google Map Maker. It's google.com/mapmaker, I think, or maps.google.com/mapmaker. Just search on it. And what happens is you can add in data, or you can edit data that's already existing in a lot of different locations. We're gradually opening it up country by country. And part of doing that is we have to have a moderation process. So when you add in data, somebody else in MapMaker has to say that the data is actually real. And then it goes again through another moderation process and hits Googlers, who then make a decision about whether or not it's they just check it versus satellite imagery and known data, just making some guesses about what's there. So it's a process to avoid spamming. So a lot of sites that like Wikipedia have a lot of big problems with people spamming their sites. So that's part of why it takes a while for that data to eventually make it into our maps. Now our goal is to make it as short as possible, a couple of months before something gets in through that mechanism. We're not always able to do that within a reasonable amount of time. And again, if the data that you're looking at is old, it may not be moderated yet. So that may be part of the issue. Okay. Next question. No other questions? Anything about Google Maps? Yes? I'm sorry, I apologize, I can't hear what you're saying. Oh, how do you get a key for checking in? That's a good question, and let me show you. So what you do, just search on Google Developer Console, and, oops, that's the wrong one here. No, wrong one. Sorry, just a moment. Here we go. So on the front page of code.google.com, click on APIs console. You'll have to be logged in. You'll see I'm logged in with my travel account, so I don't actually have much in the way, but you just click on here, Places API. You agree to the terms, you accept, and then you get in here, you click on API access, and it gives you the information that you need. So you'll see here, you'll have information if you're trying to do an OAuth connection to Google. But more importantly, here you have this API key. And you can generate a new key if you want, if you feel like somebody is has started using your key improperly. You can edit the branding information around that. And you can also get things like reports on the usage for the key, which here is going to be 0 because I literally just registered for it. Currently, we do have a limit of 100,000 requests a day through our beta program. So the Places API is in beta, and we are working on a way to let you pay us for more. So I imagine that some way that will be tied with the Premier Maps API or some other way in which you can pay for more access. Okay. Next question. Yes?
Is there any way to get the early users or other users from Google
Is the question, is there any way to get other, the check-in counts for other applications?
No, from other users in the same place.
Oh, is there a way for a user to know who else is in that location? That's something that you have to build. So because we wanted to keep it anonymous, because we don't want to be tracking your users, we want you to have the ability to keep that private from us. You can build that into your own application. And so you can keep the reference key in your own data store. You might use Google Fusion tables, for instance, for this. You want to refresh the reference key periodically because it changes about once a week. So you just do a refresh on it, keep some data about the location so you can keep that up to date. And then you keep a data store of people who had actually been at that location. Yes?
Recently, I wrote an
Can you speak up?
Yeah, recently I wrote an application for Android, and I was using the Android app.
Sorry, still can't hear you. You were writing an Android application?
Yeah, using the web map.
The map kit? Yes.
But I noticed that the touches of the touches I noticed that and I had problems because there was no rotation. For example, you see the application that is currently has the versions of Android, and they don't have the application for Google Maps. It has the rotation for YouTube.
Sure. Right.
All these cases not implemented mapping.
Okay, so let me see if I got it right, because I think this is a really good question. The question is the map view, which is the developer kit for the developer SDK for using the Android maps on Android devices, is different from Google Maps. And Google Maps has actually done some incredibly interesting things, one of which is using vector data to allow you to then rotate your maps. So if you use the Google Maps app on your Android device, you can do really cool things like rotate and tilt the map, and you see really interesting data around building profiles and that sort of thing. It's sort of a 2.5D experience. Yes, so the two don't match up. And that's because the map kit is not a wrapper for the Maps application. And actually, MapKit hasn't been updated since Android 1.6. So what we suggest and what the Android team suggests is that if you want the most modern Maps API, which unfortunately is still not going to give you the rotation yet, you use a web view and you load in the JavaScript Maps API. We're working on this problem. I don't have anything to announce to improve that. But there's an interesting point in here about the vector data that allows you to do that rotation. Because what it basically does is it downloads the geometries rather than map tiles to the Google Maps application. And I think in in the future, browsers are going to be able to support these kind of technologies. We've already seen interesting uses of WebGL in browser technology, and WebGL is starting to be supported on most mobile devices. So my guess is, and we are looking at this, trying to figure out ways to integrate it and find ways in which we can support it. You will see WebGL used to allow you to do some of the same things through a browser-based API. Yes?
How frequently do you update the data about the streets, the numbers of the streets? And for example, in Mexico, you don't have the zip codes in your data. That's something very important for the application.
We don't have what? Sorry?
Sorry?
We don't have what?
The zip codes. When I do a reverse GEO code, I don't get a zip code.
Zip code. Okay. Yeah, so that's a good question. And the question is, how frequently do we update the data? So Mexico is a map maker country. So we are using MapMaker, which is allowing our users, as well as sourcing our own data to update the map. So we're basically working constantly to get that data. Now, we don't have good data about, I'm guessing, based on what you said, we don't have good data about zip codes or postal codes within Mexico. So that's something that we're working on to get better data. So it's basically we're constantly working on that. Now, that's why we built MapMaker, because we were using major mapping data providers, Navtech and TelAtlas, and we still are in some places, to provide us with this data. And they have a turnaround time of up to a couple of years to add things to maps, sometimes longer. And that's because their process is they want to drive every street. Well, that's an incredibly labor-intensive process, and of course, if you're doing it in every street all over the world, you're going to lag behind. So we thought it would be better to have everybody tell us where things are. So we're really excited about that. So, the answer is, if you've got the data, please give it to us. We like data. Next question. Sorry, the lights are a little blinding, so I don't always see. Yes?
Where we can find information, tutorials to develop with the Google Places API.
So where can you find tutorials, information? So right now on code.google.com, it's within the Maps API documentation. I can actually show you since we're on code.google.com. So within the Maps API, if you're using it directly within the Maps API, you just look into the docs here, and you look under, oh, it's not under services. The API reference is lists places. So I'll just do a search on places. So the places library here. But also, as you can see, there's a Places API direct. This is for the direct access for the REST-based access. And currently, we don't have a ton of tutorials around it. And part of that is because it's just really simple to use. But we're going to be adding more documentation as things go on. And you follow I'll probably post something in my blog or something about that as well. So. Next question. Yes?
Why do you, about geotagging, you have a limit to geotag your places.
Sorry, can you repeat?
About geotagging, you have a limit when you use the API. and
Yes.
then you start to ask for money. Why is that?
Why do we have a limit on the number of geocodes that you can do a day?
Geocoding.
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons. One is that we work with providers for a lot of this data still. So we use MapMaker to source a lot of data, but a lot of our data still comes from other sources. And they place limits on how much we can use. And one of their fears, and one of our fears around MapMaker, is that you would just use the geocoder to scrape all our data and build your own application. So we also use it as a way to monetize, to get more money. So you can pay us for Maps API Premier access, which will give you a lot more geocoding. But let me tell you, and I just noticed that the light changed color, which means I think I have 10 or 15 minutes. And it blinds me, so I can't actually look for confirmation. If you do, the geocoding limits are IP address based. So if you are writing an application that uses the geocoder, and it's primarily targeting people who you do the geocoding on the web, it's their IP addresses that go up against the quota, not yours. Right? So it's going to be very rare that somebody in their browser is going to geocode 2,500 places in one sitting. They may do it over a course of time, but it's probably not going to be that big a deal. Now, where that comes into a problem is on mobile devices, because mobile devices often share IP addresses. So we're aware that that's a problem, and we're trying to look at ways to solve that. But currently, we don't have a good solution other than saying buy the Premier license. Yeah, you can geocode on your own servers, but you will probably run into that 2,500 limit pretty quickly if you're a popular application. I actually have an article in the Maps docs that explains the differences and when to use client-side versus server-side geocoding. Okay. Yes. Oh, yeah, can we pass down the...
Regarding to the API keys, I'm currently building an Android app.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to have 2 API keys? So, because I'm going to include the API key in the Android app, but if I renew my key, will that invalidate my old key?
If you renew your key?
Yeah, the API key to access the Places API.
Uh-huh.
If I renew the key, will it invalidate my old key? Because the old key will be included in installed apps.
No. So what I would suggest is, I think it'll actually be valid for a short period of time, but what I would suggest is instead build the app so that it fetches the key from your servers periodically, so that you know that you're
using a
about the
proxy
latest.
solution right now, so
Yeah.
I use the key on my servers.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
What about the Google Street View? Can you use the Google Street View to check in, or can you use this as in some way on the places?
Can you use Street View to check in to an application, to a location?
Well, to find a location, can you use the Google Street View as a tool for the user can identify the place easily?
Yes. Yes, you can. So the Street View API is integrated with the Google Maps API, but it can also be used separately. And it allows you to do searches on panoramas around particular locations, so that if somebody's at a particular location and they're not sure what place they're looking at, you can do a search on Street View to give them a look around what's around and have them move around to see, no, I'm actually near this particular location. And because Street View in the version 3 of the API is it's a HTML and JavaScript based Street View instead of Flash like it is on maps.google.com, That means it works on all mobile devices. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't. Let's just pass the microphone over. And is there somebody with authority over time who can tell me how many questions left I can take? No? How much time do we have left in the session? Anybody know? Nobody knows. Okay. I'll just keep going until somebody tells me to stop.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know if there is an area in Google which is making research with these platforms, Street View and Google Maps?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, do you know if there is an area of research in Google focusing on urban development and planning and this stuff?
Is there an area of research and development or focusing on urban development and planning?
Yeah, using these tools.
I know that, so there's a big industry around geospatial data and GIS data. And I know that a lot of a lot of communities are starting to integrate Street View and Google Maps into their websites to allow them to communicate with users and also to collect data about the communities. So yeah, people are increasingly looking at that. And also I think more with fusion tables than in anything else. I speak at GIS conferences all the time. People get really excited about fusion tables. So, okay, I'm gonna guess we have time for about one more question, and let's make it you there. I'm also gonna be around the rest of today. If anybody's coming tomorrow, I'm here as well, so feel free to ask me. Yes.
How can I add layers of shape, for example, from ArcGIS?
How can you add layer
Yes.
shapes
Yes.
onto the map?
Google Maps.
So are you
Using
working
that-
with shape files or?
Yes.
Yes. Come to my next session, I will talk about that. But the simple answer, so shape files, for those of you who don't know, are probably the most common GIS data format besides KML and GRSS. So they're used in high-end geographic information systems. And it's an open specification, so there are a number of ways you could do it. One is you can grab the data from using an open source library called GDL and OGR and convert it to KML and load it as a KML layer. Another is you could load it into fusion tables, and my next session I will talk about that.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we are out of time, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna be around for the next few minutes until the next session starts, so thank you very much. Can we turn off? Yeah.